The massive doors of the fancy ballroom flew open. Everyone stopped talking. Shim Kum walked in, the most dangerous man in the country. Billionaires and powerful leaders began to shake just by looking at him. But the monster didn't care about them. He walked straight toward a young man in a cheap, faded denim jacket. Han Jinhyeok. Just seconds ago, Yunwoo was laughing in Jinhyeok's face. She was wearing a white silk dress and holding red documents that would take away Jinhyeok's home in exactly 1 hour. He's just a loser, she had sneered. A factory boy who doesn't belong here. Jinhyeok just stood there, looking at the floor with sad, uncertain eyes. He was used to being picked on. He didn't say a word. But as Yunwoo moved to slap him, the room went ice cold. The Mafia King didn't pull a gun. Instead, he did something that shocked the world. He dropped to one knee before the loser. The most powerful man in the city lowered his head in total respect. Master Jinhyeok, he growled in a low, scary voice. My men are ready. The city is yours. Do I have your permission to speak? The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Yunwoo's hand started to shake. She looked at the giant man kneeling on the floor, then back at the loser she had just insulted. She couldn't believe it. Jinhyeok finally looked up. The sadness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp look. For years, he had hidden his identity. He wore the old denim jacket to hide a bloodline, so powerful it could control the whole country's money. He wanted to be a normal person. He wanted peace. But Yunwoo had made a huge mistake. She thought his kindness was weakness. Speak, Jinhyeok whispered. Shim Kum stood up and looked at Yunwoo like a hungry wolf. Ms. Yunwoo, he said, his voice cold. You have 60 seconds to burn those papers, or I will destroy everything you love while you watch. The loser was gone. The true king was back. The silence in the ballroom was so heavy it felt like it might crush the lungs of every billionaire standing there. All eyes were locked on the impossible sight of Shim Kum, a man who moved like a mountain of dark silk, bowing his head before a boy whose denim jacket looked like a dirty rag. Jinhyeok didn't move. He felt the heat of Yunwoo's gaze, a mixture of confusion and pure, shaking terror. He could smell the sharp scent of expensive sandalwood coming from the giant man at his feet. Jinhyeok's hands, which had been hanging weakly at his sides, slowly tightened into fists. He finally looked up at Yunwoo. She was clutching her red documents, so tightly her knuckles were white. Her pure, white dress suddenly looked like she was dressed for her own funeral. Speak, Jinhyeok whispered. His voice was small, but in that deathly quiet room, it sounded like a thunderclap. Shim Kum straightened his spine. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't even care about the gasps of the rich socialites. He simply reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a gold-plated phone. His eyes, cold and sharp like black glass, fixed on Yunwoo. The Jinhyeok estate, Shim Kum began, his voice a low, terrifying growl that made the floorboards vibrate. It was never for sale. Those red documents you are holding, Ms. Yunwoo, they were signed by a ghost. Yunwoo's lips trembled. That's impossible. These are legal. I have the power to take his grandmother's house. You have nothing, Shim Kum interrupted, his voice dropping into a deadly promise. In the last 30 seconds, I bought the bank that holds your family's debt. I bought the law firm that helped you forge those papers. And I have just ordered the police to seize your father's office for fraud. He stepped forward, invading Yunwoo's space. The monster of the north towered over her, his presence turning the air to ice. The red documents in your hand are no longer power. They are evidence. If you don't drop them and run in the next 10 seconds, you won't just be poor. You will disappear. The papers fell from Yunwoo's shaking hand, hitting the marble floor with a soft, pathetic thud. The trap she had spent months building was destroyed by a single sentence from a man who only took orders from the loser. The black car moved silently through the city, and Jinhyeok felt like he was in a dream. He sat on the edge of the soft leather seat, looking down at his old, dirty sneakers. They didn't belong in a car this fancy. Across from him sat Shim, the man everyone feared. Shim didn't say a word, but his presence felt like a heavy shield, protecting Jinhyeok from the world that had just tried to destroy him. They stopped at a building that was so tall it seemed to touch the stars. It was a tower of glass and steel, guarded by men with cold eyes and earpieces. The elevator moved so fast Jinhyeok's stomach dropped. When the doors opened, he gasped. The penthouse was huge. The floors were made of white marble that shone like a mirror, and the walls were nothing but glass, showing an entire glowing city below. "This is your home, Master Jinhyeok," Shim said. His voice was no longer a scary growl, but soft and respectful. Jinhyeok walked to a window. From up here, the people who had laughed at him looked like tiny ants. He felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Then, he noticed a wall of glowing computer screens in the corner. He walked closer, and his heart nearly stopped. On the screens were live videos of his old life. He saw the tiny, broken apartment where he had lived. He saw the grocery store where he counted his pennies to buy noodles. He even saw the bus stop where he had waited in the freezing rain. He realized then that he was never actually alone. Every time he thought he was at his lowest, there were eyes watching over him from the shadows. "You thought you were a loser hiding from the world," Shim whispered, standing behind him. "But we were the ones hiding you. We let the world treat you like dirt, so they would never suspect you were the king. Your poverty was the best disguise we ever had." A tear rolled down Jinhyeok's cheek. He thought about the hunger and the insults he had suffered for years. It wasn't just bad luck. It was a secret war to keep him alive. He touched the cool glass of the window, seeing his reflection. He still looked like a boy in a faded denim jacket, but now he knew the truth. His ordinary life was a lie. The loser was dead, and the most powerful man in the city had finally come home. The study was quiet, smelling of old paper and the warm, woody scent of sandalwood. Shim walked to a large iron safe hidden behind a dark painting. He pulled out a leather folder and placed it on the marble desk. Inside was a piece of paper that looked exactly like the red documents Yun Woo had used to bully Jinhyeok at the party. "Look closely, Master Jinhyeok," Shim said quietly. Jinhyeok's fingers shook as he touched the page. It was the original deed to his family's massive estate. But at the bottom, there was something special, a faint, glowing blue seal shaped like a dragon. It was the mark of the sovereign. He compared it to the red papers Yun Woo had held. Side by side, the truth was easy to see. "She didn't just find these," Jinhyeok whispered, his heart thumping in his chest. "She changed them." "She stole them, Jinhyeok," Shim said, his eyes turning dark with anger. 10 years ago, when your father died, Yun Woo's family were just servants in your house. They cleaned the floors you walked on. But when the king fell, they became thieves. Her father stole the real papers and made these fake red ones to claim your land was theirs." A wave of cold anger washed over Jinhyeok. For years, he had lived in a tiny, freezing room, eating cheap noodles and being called a loser by the girl in the white silk dress. It was all a lie. He wasn't a guest in her world. She was a thief in his. The red documents weren't just papers. They were proof of everything she had taken from him. So, the mansion she lives in, the fancy car, the dress she wore tonight. Jinhyeok's voice shook with emotion. "It was all paid for with my family's money. Everything," Shim promised, bowing his head. "She laughed at you for being poor while she spent your fortune. She called you a loser while standing on the ground you own. You are the master of everything she has." Jinhyeok looked at his reflection in the dark window. He was still wearing the old denim jacket, but he didn't feel like a victim anymore. He felt like a man who had finally found his power. The girl in the white dress had spent years mocking a king, and now it was time for the king to take back his throne. The morning sun hit the glass walls of Swain Tower, but inside the main boardroom, the air felt like a freezer. Yun Woo sat at the head of the long mahogany table, wearing a sharp power suit and a smug smile. When the door opened and Jinhyeok walked in, still wearing his faded denim jacket, she didn't even try to hide her laughter. "Did you get lost on your way to the basement, Jinhyeok?" she mocked, her voice echoing through the silent room. This is a high-level meeting for the owners of the city. We don't need anyone here to clean the floors. The other board members, all men in expensive suits who had helped her family steal the estate, joined in her laughter. Jinhyeok didn't say a single word. He walked to the far end of the table and pulled out a chair. His face was calm, but his wide eyes were no longer uncertain. They were watching Yun-woo like a storm waiting to break. Security, Yun-woo shouted, slamming her hand on the table. Throw this loser out. He's trespassing on my property. But the security guards didn't move. Instead, the heavy double doors swung open with a bang. Shim-kum walked in, followed by 4 men in black suits who looked like they were carved out of stone. The laughter in the room died instantly. One board member was so scared, he dropped his gold pen, the clatter sounding like a gunshot in the silence. Shim-kum didn't look at Yun-woo. He walked straight to Jinhyeok and stood behind him like a dark, immovable wall. The young master is not trespassing, Shim-kum said, his voice a low, terrifying growl that made the water in the glasses on the table tremble. Yun-woo stood up, her face turning a pale, sickly green. What is this? This is my company. My father and these men. These men are finished. Shim-kum interrupted, his eyes scanning the row of board members. I have reviewed the records. Every person at this table has taken a bribe to help the Yun family steal from the Jinhyeok bloodline. You aren't directors. You are thieves. He pulled a stack of black folders from his assistant and tossed them onto the table. You are all fired. Effective immediately. Your bank account are frozen, and your luxury cars are being towed as we speak. If you are still in this building in 5 minutes, you will be leaving in handcuffs. One by one, the powerful men scrambled out of their chairs, running for the exit without looking back. Yun-woo was left standing alone, clutching the back of her chair, so hard her nails left marks in the leather. She looked at Jinhyeok, waiting for him to brag or shout, but he just sat there in his old denim jacket, silent and powerful. He didn't need to say a word. The loser had just cleared the room with a single glance from his protector, and for the first time, Yun-woo realized that the chair she was sitting in didn't belong to her at all. The sun was setting behind the city's skyscrapers, casting long, bloody shadows over the streets. Jinhyeok stood in the center of his marble penthouse, staring at his phone. A video had just arrived. It showed a dark, damp basement where his only friend, Minho, the guy who used to share his cheap noodles, was tied to a chair, bruised and shaking. Then, Yun-woo's voice came through the speaker, high-pitched and desperate. You think you won because you have Shim-kum? You're still just a soft, pathetic loser, Jinhyeok. Bring the signed deeds to the old docks in 30 minutes, or your friend pays for your arrogance. Shim-kum stepped forward, his hand moving toward the pistol tucked into his suit. Master Jinhyeok, give the order. My men will level that building in seconds. Jinhyeok didn't blink. He didn't even look angry. He just reached out and gently pushed Shim-kum's hand away from the weapon. No, Jinhyeok said, his voice as calm as a deep lake. I'll go alone. When Jinhyeok arrived at the docks, he was still wearing his old denim jacket. Yun-woo was waiting with 10 hired thugs, all holding heavy metal pipes. She looked at him and laughed, though her voice was trembling. Where is your monster, Jinhyeok? Did he realize you weren't worth saving? Sign the papers, or my men will break every bone in Minho's body. Jinhyeok walked toward her, his hands tucked into his pockets. He didn't run, and he didn't hide. He stopped just inches away from the leader of the thugs, a man twice his size. I have spent my whole life being hit, Jinhyeok whispered, looking the man in the eyes. I have learned exactly where a blow hurts most, and exactly how to stay standing. You think my restraint is weakness? No, it was a choice. The leader swung a pipe at Jinhyeok's head. Jinhyeok didn't flinch. With a movement so fast it was almost invisible, he stepped inside the swing, his palms striking the man's chest. It wasn't a wild punch. It was a precise, lethal strike to the nerves. The giant man collapsed instantly, gasping for air as if his lungs had forgotten how to work. The other thugs froze. Jinhyeok didn't move to attack them. He just stood there, his face honest and youthful, but his presence felt like a crushing weight. He had spent years absorbing pain, and in doing so, he had learned the dark art of how to end it. One by one, the men backed away, dropping their weapons. They weren't afraid of a fighter. They were terrified of a man who could take everything they had without breaking a sweat. Yun-woo fell back against a shipping crate, the papers slipping from her hands. Jinhyeok walked past her, as if she were invisible, untying Min-ho with steady hands. "I told you, Yun-woo," Jinhyeok said softly, not even looking back. "I was never a loser. I was just waiting for you to show me who you really were." The cold wind blew through the narrow, dark streets of Jinhyeok's old neighborhood. He walked slowly, his hands stuffed deep into the pockets of his faded denim jacket. The fabric was thin, and the sleeves were torn at the edges. To anyone watching, he looked like the same loser who used to hide from bullies in these dirty alleys. But tonight, the air felt different. The silence behind him wasn't empty, it was dangerous. Out of the thick gray fog, a line of 10 shiny black SUVs began to crawl down the cramped street. They moved slowly, like sharks in shallow water. Their engines made a low, scary hum that vibrated in the windows of the old, crumbling houses. This was the Mafia fleet. Behind the dark glass sat Shim-kum's best soldiers, all waiting for a single word from the boy in the denim jacket. Jinhyeok stopped in front of the rusted gate of his old apartment. Standing there were 3 local bullies he knew too well. These were the men who used to steal his grocery money, trip him to mud, and scare the elderly neighbors. When they saw Jinhyeok, they started to smirk. The leader pulled out a small knife and stepped forward. "Look who's back," the bully sneered, blocking the path. "Did you find some more lunch money for us, loser? Or do we need to kick you around again to remind you who owns this street?" Jinhyeok didn't shake. He didn't look down at the ground. He simply looked the bully in the eyes and raised his hand in a small, sharp motion. Suddenly, the doors of every black SUV flew open at the exact same time. 20 men in black tactical suits flooded the alley. They didn't scream or shout. They moved with a terrifying, professional silence. Before the bullies could even breathe, they were slammed against the brick walls. Their knives were kicked away, and their faces were pressed into the cold dirt. Neighbors started peeking out from behind their curtains, their eyes wide with shock. They saw the boy they used to feel sorry for standing calmly in the middle of a small army. Shim-kum stepped out of the lead car, walked to Jinhyeok's side, and bowed his head low. "The area is being cleaned, Master Jinhyeok," Shim-kum said, his voice echoing in the quiet street. "Every predator who ever hurt you is being taken away. By morning, these streets will be safe." Jinhyeok looked at the bullies trembling on the ground. For years, they were the monsters who made his life a nightmare. Now they looked like tiny, scared insects. He didn't feel happy. He just felt a quiet, sad peace. He had come back like a ghost to haunt the people who thought he was nothing. He turned around and walked away. The Mafia fleet followed him like a dark, protective shadow. He was no longer a boy living in the dirt. He was a man who owned the city. The golden luxury of the penthouse suddenly felt like a trap. Jinhyeok sat at the edge of the marble desk, watching Shim-kum through the reflection in the glass. The large man was standing by the safe, holding a new set of papers, documents that Jinhyeok had never seen before. The air in the room grew heavy, and the usual scent of sandalwood felt thick and suffocating. "You've done well, Master Jinhyeok," Shim-kum said, his back still turned. "The people believe you are the king. The enemies are scared. The board is set." Jinhyeok felt a chill run down his spine. "What are those papers, Shim-kum?" Shim-kum turned around, and for the first time, his eyes weren't filled with respect. They were cold and hungry. He laid the documents on the desk. It was a transfer of total authority, not to the Jinhyeok bloodline, but to Shim-kum himself. The city needs a monster to rule it, not a boy with a kind heart. Shim-kum whispered, his voice sounding like gravel. "I protected you so I could use your name to settle the wars. Now that the streets are quiet, I need you to sign these. You can keep the penthouse. You can keep the denim jacket. But I will keep the power." Jinhyeok looked at the pen Shim-kum pushed toward him. Outside the door, he could hear the heavy footsteps of the Mafia fleet. They weren't there to protect him anymore. They were there to make sure he didn't leave. Shim-kum thought Jinhyeok was just a puppet, a loser who had been lucky enough to find a protector. Jinhyeok didn't pick up the pen. Instead, he stood up slowly, his shoulders square and his gaze steady. "You think I didn't see this coming?" Jinhyeok asked softly. "You think I survived 10 years in the dirt because I was lucky?" Shimkum laughed, a dry, harsh sound. "You have nothing without me. My men only follow my orders." "Check your phone, Shimkum," Jinhyeok said. Shimkum's brow furrowed. He pulled out his gold phone. His face went from arrogant to ghostly pale in seconds. The live feeds of the Mafia fleet showed the soldiers standing perfectly still. But their weapons weren't pointed at the city. They were pointed at Shimkum's inner circle. "You taught them to follow the strongest man," Jinhyeok said, stepping toward the giant. "But I showed them who actually owns the bloodline they swear to protect. I didn't just absorb the pain you put me through. Shimkum, I studied you. I know every bribe you paid and every secret you kept." Jinhyeok took the gold phone from Shimkum's trembling hand. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I am not your puppet. I am the sovereign. And a sovereign doesn't need a shadow that tries to block the sun." With one look, Jinhyeok showed the world that his honesty was his greatest weapon. Shimkum dropped to his knees, not out of respect this time, but out of total defeat. The student had become the master. The grand hall of the Justice Building was filled with the sound of cameras and reporters. Yun-Woo stood at the front, wearing her most expensive white dress. She looked like an angel. She was telling a big lie to the world. She said that Jinhyeok was a criminal who was trying to steal her family's company. She looked confident and powerful, thinking she had already won. Then the back doors opened. Jinhyeok walked down the long aisle. He wasn't wearing a fancy suit, and he didn't have any bodyguard with him. He was wearing his old, faded denim jacket. Yun-Woo's voice stopped. She expected him to come with guns or a scary mob, but he was alone. He looked like the same loser she had made fun of for years, but the room went ice cold as he walked toward her. Jinhyeok stopped in front of her. He didn't scream or get angry. He just looked up at her with his wide, honest eyes. "The truth doesn't need to be loud, Yun-Woo," Jinhyeok said quietly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small thumb drive. "This isn't a weapon. It's the last 10 years of your life. It shows every fake signature, every time you laugh about my sick grandmother, and every dollar you stole from my family." Yun-Woo tried to laugh, but her face was shaking with fear. "No one will believe in nobody like you." "I'm not asking them to believe me," Jinhyeok replied, his voice calm. "I'm asking them to look at who you really are." He nodded to the man at the computer. Suddenly, the giant screens behind the stage turned on. It was a video of Yun-Woo from months ago. In the video, she was standing over Jinhyeok in the mud, bragging that her father had killed Jinhyeok's father to steal the money. Her voice was clear for everyone to hear. The angel in the white dress was actually a monster. The room went crazy. The police moved in to arrest her. Jinhyeok stayed perfectly still. He watched as the rich people who used to be her friends turned their backs on her. He watched as her white dress reputation fell apart. Yun-Woo fell to her knees, her hair messy and her eyes filled with terror. For the first time, she saw the real Jinhyeok. He hadn't used guns to win. He used the one thing she could never understand, the truth. "You said I was a boy dying in the dirt," Jinhyeok whispered, looking down at her with pity. "But the dirt is honest, Yun-Woo. It doesn't hide the rot like you do." He turned around and walked out of the hall, leaving her in the middle of a crowd of flashing cameras. She wasn't a queen anymore. She was just a thief caught in the light. The city was finally quiet. From the top floor of the Sovereign Tower, the lights below looked like a carpet of fallen stars. Jinhyeok stood by the massive glass window, but he wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at his own reflection. He was no longer the boy shivering in the rain or the loser absorbing insults in a ballroom. He was the man who held the keys to the country's future. Shimkum stood by the door, his head bowed deeper than ever before. Behind him, the leaders of the most powerful families in the land waited in a long, silent line. They had come to pledge their loyalty, not to a monster, but to a king who knew the value of a single honest word. The syndicate was no longer a shadow of violence. Under Jinhyeok's command, It was becoming a shield for the people the world had forgotten. "The transition is complete, Master Jinhyeok," Shimkum said, his voice full of genuine pride. "The country knows your name. The syndicate follows your heart. What is your first command?" Jinhyeok turned away from the window. He walked toward the center of the room, where a simple pedestal stood under a bright spotlight. On top of it sat a thick glass case, sealed tight. Inside the case was a faded blue denim jacket, the sleeves still frayed, the fabric still worn thin from years of struggle. "My first command is that this stays here," Jinhyeok said, touching the cool glass. "Whenever a leader enters this room, they must see this jacket. I want them to remember that the person they're looking down on today might be the one who owns their world tomorrow." Shimkum nodded, understanding the depth of the lesson. Jinhyeok had spent 10 years being treated like dirt, and that experience had given him a power no suit or gun could ever provide. He had learned how to see through lies, how to endure pain, and how to lead with empathy. He walked to his desk and sat down. He wasn't wearing silk or gold. He was wearing a simple, clean shirt. He looked at the city he now protected. Yunwoo was gone, the thieves had been punished, and the loser had finally claimed his throne. But as he picked up his pen to sign the first law of his new era, Jinhyeok glanced back at the denim jacket one last time. He didn't keep it because he missed being poor. He kept it because it was his armor. It was a reminder that he didn't need a crown to be a king. He only needed to be the man who stayed standing when everyone else expected him to fall. The sovereign had returned, and for the first time in history, the country was in honest hands.